The rain tapped softly against the windows of Murphy's diner, creating a gentle rhythm that filled the nearly empty space. Yellow light from old fixtures cast long shadows across worn vinyl booths and checkered floors. Steam rose from coffee cups, mixing with the scent of fried onions and hope. In the corner booth sat Rachel Lynn, 28 years old with tired eyes that had seen too much. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, damp strands framing her delicate Asian features. She wore a faded denim jacket over a worn sweater, her hands wrapped around an empty water glass as if it could warm her soul. The waitress, a kind woman with graying hair, approached with concern etched on her face. "Honey, you've been sitting here for 2 hours. Can I get you something to eat?" Rachel's stomach growled audibly, betraying her hunger. She looked down at her purse, knowing exactly what she'd find. $3.47. Not enough for even the cheapest item on the menu. Just a cup of hot water, please," Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible above the rain. "With lemon, if you have it." The waitress's expression softened. She'd seen plenty of people down on their luck, but something about this young woman's quiet dignity touched her heart. At the booth across the narrow aisle sat a man in his early 50s. Robert Markham wore a simple navy suit, well-tailored but understated. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed, and his kind brown eyes held a weight that spoke of loss and recovery. He'd been watching the young woman discreetly, recognizing the familiar signs of someone fighting an invisible battle. Robert had ordered the meatloaf special, but barely touched it. His mind was elsewhere, lost in memories of his own dark period 5 years ago, when everything had seemed hopeless. He understood that particular kind of hunger, not just for food, but for hope itself. As he prepared to leave, sliding his coat on and reaching for his wallet, he heard the softest voice behind him. "Excuse me, sir?" Robert turned. The young woman was looking at him with eyes that held no shame, only quiet desperation and something deeper, a strength that hadn't been broken despite everything. "May I have your leftovers, sir?" The words hung in the air like a prayer. Robert felt something shift inside his chest, a recognition that went beyond the moment. Those eyes. There was something familiar about them, something that stirred a memory he couldn't quite place. For a heartbeat, the diner fell silent except for the rain. The waitress paused mid-step. Even the cook seemed to stop moving in the kitchen. Robert looked down at his barely touched meal, then back at Rachel. Without hesitation, he slid the plate across to her table. "Of course," he said simply. "Please." Rachel's eyes filled with grateful tears as she whispered, "Thank you." Robert nodded, left money on his table, and walked toward the door. But something made him pause at the threshold. He turned back to see Rachel eating slowly, savoring each bite as if it were a gift from heaven. That's when it hit him like lightning. Those eyes, that gentle way she moved, the same careful grace he remembered from the worst day of his life. His hand trembling slightly, Robert pulled out his phone and stepped into the rain. "Where are you watching this video right now? At home, on the bus, or maybe in a small diner just like Rachel? Let me know in the comments below. I love hearing from each and every one of you." 3 hours earlier, Rachel's world had collapsed in the span of 5 minutes. "I'm sorry, Rachel, but we have to let you go." Mrs. Patterson, the manager of Sunnyside Cafe, couldn't meet her eyes as she spoke. "Corporate says you're too involved with the customers." Rachel stood in the small back office, still wearing her apron, trying to process what she was hearing. "Too involved? I don't understand." "Yesterday, when that little boy almost knocked over the display case, you caught him and made sure he was okay. His mother complained that you were being inappropriate, touching her child without permission." The memory flashed through Rachel's mind. A 3-year-old had been running between tables when he tripped. Rachel had instinctively reached out, preventing him from crashing into the glass case filled with pastries. The child had giggled and thanked her. The mother, however, had been furious. "I was protecting him from getting hurt," Rachel said quietly. "I know, honey, I know, but corporate doesn't see it that way. They say we can't risk liability issues." Mrs. Patterson finally looked up, her own eyes misty. "You're the best worker we've had in years. This isn't fair, but my hands are tied." Rachel untied her apron with the steady fingers. though her heart was racing. This was her third job in 6 months. Each time she'd been let go for caring too much, for being too invested in helping others. The walk back to her tiny studio apartment felt like a march to execution. Each step brought her closer to reality. She had exactly $63 to her name, and rent was due in 3 days. Mrs. Chen, her elderly landlord, was waiting by the mailboxes when Rachel arrived. "Miss Lin," she said, not unkindly but firmly, "we need to talk." They climbed the narrow stairs to the 4th floor in silence. Rachel's apartment was smaller than most people's closets. Just enough space for a bed, a hot plate, and a tiny bathroom. But it had been home for 8 months, the longest she'd stayed anywhere since dropping out of nursing school. "I know you lost your job," Mrs. Chen said gently. "Mrs. Patterson called me. She's worried about you." Rachel sat heavily on her bed, the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. "I can pay next month's rent. I'll find another job." "Honey, you're 3 months behind already. I've been patient because you're a good girl, but I have bills too." The words hit Rachel like physical blows. 3 months behind. How had she lost track so completely? "I need you to be out by Friday," Mrs. Chen continued. "I'm sorry, I really am." After Mrs. Chen left, Rachel sat in the gathering darkness of her small room. She didn't turn on the lights. Electricity cost money she didn't have. Her mind drifted back 5 years to the day that changed everything. She'd been a second-year nursing student, bright-eyed and full of hope. During her hospital rotation, she'd witnessed a terrible car accident right outside the emergency room. A black sedan had collided with a delivery truck. The car had burst into flames immediately. Everyone was running away from the wreckage. But Rachel had heard something that made her blood freeze. A child crying. Without thinking, she'd run toward the burning car. In the back seat was a little boy, maybe 3 years old, trapped in his car seat. The flames were spreading fast. The child's father was unconscious in the front seat, blood streaming down his face. Rachel had managed to unbuckle the boy and pull him from the car just seconds before the entire vehicle was engulfed. She'd carried him to safety, staying with him until the paramedics arrived, singing softly to calm his terror. The father had survived, but Rachel never learned their names. The hospital administration had been furious that a student had endangered herself. There was talk of lawsuits, of liability. The stress, combined with her family's financial crisis, had forced her to drop out. She'd never finished her nursing degree. Instead, she'd spent 5 years drifting from job to job, always caring too much, always getting too involved, always losing everything when her heart got in the way of policy. Now, sitting in the dark with eviction looming, Rachel wondered if that moment of heroism had been worth it. She'd saved one life but seemed to have lost her own in the process. Her stomach growled loudly in the silence. She had a can of soup in her cupboard, her dinner for tonight. Tomorrow she'd figure out where to go, what to do next. But tonight she was just hungry, tired, and more alone than she'd ever been. Rain began to fall outside her single window, and Rachel watched the droplets race down the glass like tears. She needed food, she needed hope, and she needed a miracle. She had no idea that all three were about to find her in the most unexpected way. Robert Markham sat in his car outside Murphy's Diner for 20 minutes after leaving, his hands gripping the steering wheel as memories flooded back. 5 years ago, his world had been perfect. A successful architect with a loving wife, Sarah, and their 3-year-old son, Tommy. They'd been driving home from Tommy's first day at preschool when the delivery truck ran the red light. The impact had been devastating. Sarah died on the scene. Robert had awakened in the hospital 3 days later to learn that his wife was gone, but his son had survived. Tommy had been saved by a young nursing student who'd risked her own life to pull him from the burning car. Robert had spent months trying to find that student, to thank her properly, but the hospital wouldn't release her information due to privacy policies. All he knew was that she'd been Asian, probably in her early 20s, with the kindest eyes he'd ever seen. Tonight, in that diner, he'd looked into those same eyes. Robert pulled out his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. "Marcus? It's Robert. I need you to do something for me." "No, tonight. I think I found her." Marcus Webb had been Robert's private investigator for 3 years, helping him search for the mysterious nursing student. A former police detective, Marcus had become more friend than employee in their quest. Found who, Rob? The student. I'm at Murphy's Diner on 5th Street. There's a young woman here, Asian, about 28 now. She just asked for my leftovers. Robert's voice cracked slightly. Marcus, it's her. I know it's her. 20 minutes later, Marcus arrived at the diner. Through the window, they watched Rachel slowly eating the meatloaf, making each bite last. Her careful movements, the way she kept looking around as if expecting to be asked to leave. It broke Robert's heart. I'll talk to the waitress, Marcus said quietly. Get some information. While Robert waited in the car, Marcus went inside and approached the counter. The waitress, whose name tag read Dolores, was cleaning glasses with obvious concern. Excuse me, Marcus said, showing his investigator's license. I'm not here to cause trouble. My client just wants to help that young woman. Dolores looked skeptical. Help how? She's been through enough without strangers bothering her. What do you mean? Dolores glanced toward Rachel, who was now holding a warm cup of coffee that someone had quietly sent over. That girl's been coming here for weeks. Always orders just hot water or coffee. Never enough for a real meal. Lost her job today. Third one this year. Getting evicted Friday. Marcus felt his throat tighten. What's her name? Rachel Lynn. Sweetest person you'd ever meet. Used to be in nursing school, but something happened. Now she can't seem to catch a break. Dolores leaned closer. She helps everyone who comes in here. Last week, she gave her last $5 to a homeless man. That's the kind of person she is. Marcus thanked Dolores and returned to the car, sharing what he'd learned with Robert. Rachel Lynn, Robert repeated softly. After all this time. What do you want to do? Robert watched as Rachel finished eating and carefully folded the napkin, placing it neatly on the plate. Even in her desperation, she maintained a dignity that reminded him so clearly of that day 5 years ago. I want to help her, but carefully. She's proud. I can see that. If we come on too strong, she'll run. What are you thinking? Start small, anonymous help. Make sure she has food, shelter. Then when the time is right, I'll tell her who I am. Over the next hour, Marcus worked his magic. He spoke with Mrs. Chen, Rachel's landlord, arranging to pay her back rent anonymously. He contacted several local restaurants and set up a fund to ensure Rachel could eat. He even reached out to the community college, exploring options for her to finish her nursing degree. Meanwhile, Robert sat in his car, watching Rachel through the diner window. She was reading a paperback book now, probably to justify staying longer in the warmth. Her face in the lamplight was serene despite everything she was going through. His phone buzzed with a text from his babysitter. Tommy's asking when you'll be home. Homework's done, but he wants to wait up for you. Tommy, his miracle boy, now 8 years old and full of life. Every day for 5 years, Robert had looked at his son and thought of the brave young woman who'd saved him. He'd imagined finding her, thanking her, somehow repaying the debt that could never truly be repaid. Now she was 50 feet away, hungry and homeless, with no idea that the man she'd asked for leftovers was the father of the child she'd saved. Robert started his car. Tomorrow he would begin to change Rachel's life the way she had changed his. But tonight he would go home to his son and tell him that sometimes the universe has a way of bringing people back together when they need each other most. As he drove away, Robert glanced in his rearview mirror one last time. Rachel was still there, safe and warm, reading her book. Soon, very soon, she would understand that her act of heroism had not been forgotten. Some debts, Robert thought, take 5 years to repay. The knock on Rachel's door came at 7 in the morning, sharp and professional. Rachel jolted awake on her thin mattress, confused and disoriented. No one ever visited her, especially not at this hour. She wrapped her robe around herself and approached the door cautiously. Through the peephole, she saw a well-dressed woman in her 40s, holding an envelope and wearing an expression of kind determination. Miss Lynn, the woman called through the door. My name is Margaret Torres. I work for Markham Foundation. I have something for you. Rachel's heart raced. Foundation? She'd never heard of any Markham Foundation, and she certainly hadn't applied for anything. This had to be a mistake. She opened the door just wide enough to see the woman clearly. Margaret Torres looked genuine enough. professional but warm, with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong person," Rachel said quietly. Margaret smiled gently. "Are you Rachel Lynn, formerly a nursing student at Metropolitan University?" Rachel's blood went cold. How did this stranger know about her past? Yes, but I don't understand what this is about. "Mr. Markham would like to meet with you. He has a proposition that could change your life." Margaret extended the envelope. "Everything you need to know is in here. A car will pick you up at 10 this morning, if you're willing." Rachel stared at the envelope as if it might bite her. In her experience, when things seem too good to be true, they usually were. And right now, with eviction hanging over her head and her last $3 in her pocket, she couldn't afford to trust in miracles. "What kind of proposition?" she asked suspiciously. "Mr. Markham prefers to explain himself. I can tell you that he's a legitimate businessman, well respected in the community." "This isn't a scam, Miss Lynn. It's an opportunity." Rachel's hands trembled slightly as she looked at the envelope. Inside could be hope, could be a way out of the nightmare her life had become. But it could also be something darker, some kind of trap. "I appreciate the offer, but I can't accept," Rachel said, stepping back from the door. "Please tell Mr. Markham thank you, but I'm not interested." Margaret's expression didn't change, but Rachel caught a flicker of disappointment in her eyes. "Miss Lynn, may I ask why?" The question hung in the air between them. Rachel could have said she was busy, could have made up any excuse. Instead, the truth tumbled out. "Because people like me don't get opportunities like this. I'm a college dropout who got fired from a waitressing job for caring too much about a customer's kid. I live in a studio apartment that I'm about to be evicted from. I asked a stranger for his leftovers last night." Rachel's voice grew stronger, more defiant. "So whatever this Mr. Markham thinks he knows about me, he's wrong. I'm nobody special." Margaret listened to every word without judgment. When Rachel finished, she simply nodded and placed the envelope on the floor by the door. "Miss Lynn, I think you're exactly who Mr. Markham hoped you'd be. When you change your mind, and I believe you will, the offer stands. His number is in the envelope." After Margaret left, Rachel stood staring at the envelope for a full 10 minutes before picking it up. Inside was a simple business card. Robert Markham, President, Markham Foundation, and a handwritten note. "Dear Miss Lynn, I believe we have something important to discuss. It concerns an event from 5 years ago that changed both our lives. I hope you'll give me the chance to explain. RM, double quote, 5 years ago." Rachel's hands began to shake as she read the note again. What could this stranger possibly know about 5 years ago? About the accident? About the boy she'd saved? About the moment that had derailed her entire future? She crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. Then 5 minutes later, she retrieved it and smoothed it out. Numbers, she couldn't do this. She couldn't allow herself to hope that someone, somewhere, might actually care about what happened to her. Hope was dangerous. Hope led to disappointment, and she'd had enough disappointment to last several lifetimes. Instead, Rachel grabbed her jacket and headed out into the morning. She had a plan, a simple, realistic plan that didn't involve mysterious benefactors or impossible opportunities. She would spend the day looking for work, cleaning offices, washing dishes, anything that would pay enough for a new security deposit somewhere. She would pull herself up the same way she always had, through her own effort, her own determination. As she walked down the stairs, Rachel passed Mrs. Chen coming up with groceries. "Good morning, dear," Mrs. Chen said cheerfully. "I have good news. Someone paid your back rent last night, all of it, plus next month. Anonymous donor. Isn't that wonderful?" Rachel stopped cold on the staircase. "What?" "A cashier's check. Completely legitimate. You can stay as long as you want now." Rachel's mind raced back to the envelope, to the mysterious Mr. Markham, to the impossible coincidence of timing. Her chest tightened with a mixture of gratitude and terror. Someone was watching her. Someone was helping her. And somehow, that frightened her more than being homeless ever could. Robert Markham found Rachel 3 days later, sitting on a bench in Riverside Park, sharing her lunch with a stray dog. She'd taken a job cleaning the park restrooms. Minimum wage, but honest work that let her be outside and help keep the community beautiful. She looked up as his shadow fell across her, and Robert saw recognition flicker in her eyes. Not of who he was, but of where she'd seen him before. "You're the man from the diner," she said quietly, not afraid but cautious. "Yes, and you're the woman who asked for my leftovers." Robert gestured to the bench. "May I sit?" Rachel nodded, though she kept her body angled slightly away from him, ready to leave if necessary. The stray dog, a golden retriever mix with graying fur, moved protectively closer to her side. "You're Mr. Markham," Rachel said. It wasn't a question. "I am. And you're Rachel Lynn, the nursing student who saved my son's life 5 years ago." The words hit Rachel like a physical blow. Her sandwich fell from nerveless fingers, and the dog quickly snatched it up. She stared at Robert with wide, unbelieving eyes. That's not possible," she whispered. Robert reached into his jacket and pulled out a small photo, worn soft from handling. It showed a little boy with dark hair and bright eyes, maybe 3 years old, sitting on a hospital bed with a huge smile and a teddy bear. "His name is Tommy," Robert said gently. "He's 8 now. He asks about you sometimes. The angel who saved him from the fire." Rachel's hands trembled as she took the photo. The little boy's face was exactly as she remembered. Sweet, innocent, full of life. She'd thought about him countless times over the years, wondering if he was okay, if he remembered what happened. "The car accident," she said, her voice barely audible. "You were the father in the front seat. I was unconscious. I never saw what you did. But the paramedics told me later. A nursing student ran into a burning car to save my son. By the time I woke up in the hospital, you were gone. No one would tell me your name." Tears began to flow down Rachel's cheeks. "Your wife. I tried to get to her first, but the flames—" "Sarah died on impact," Robert said softly. "There was nothing you could have done for her. But Tommy was trapped in his car seat, and if you hadn't acted—" He paused, his own voice thick with emotion. "You gave me the only family I had left." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 5 years of searching and wondering hanging between them. "I looked for you," Robert continued. "I hired investigators, contacted the hospital dozens of times. I knew that someday, somehow, I'd find you and thank you properly." Rachel wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I dropped out of school after that. The administration was furious that I'd put myself in danger. There were insurance issues, liability concerns. My family was already struggling financially, and the stress—" She shrugged helplessly. "I never finished my degree. Because you saved my son. Because I couldn't handle the pressure afterward." Robert shook his head firmly. "Number. Because you were brave when everyone else ran away. Because you have a heart that puts others before yourself. Because you're exactly the kind of person the world needs more of." A black SUV pulled up to the curb nearby, and Robert waved. The driver got out and opened the back door. A boy with dark hair and bright eyes climbed out, looking around curiously. "Daddy?" the boy called. "Is that her?" Rachel's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the child from the photo, now 5 years older, but with the same gentle spirit in his eyes. "Tommy," Robert called back. "Come here, son. I want you to meet someone very special." The boy approached shyly, staying close to his father's side. Robert put his arm around his son's shoulders. "Tommy, this is Miss Rachel. She's the lady I told you about." Tommy's eyes went wide with wonder and recognition. "The angel lady? The one who saved me from the fire?" Rachel couldn't speak. She could only nod as fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Without hesitation, Tommy stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Rachel's waist, hugging her tightly. "Thank you," he whispered into her jacket. "Daddy says you're the bravest person in the whole world." Rachel's composure finally broke completely. She hugged the boy back, overwhelmed by the warmth and innocence of his embrace. This was why she'd risked everything. This moment, this life, this beautiful child who was now healthy and happy and full of love. "I've been looking for you for 5 years, Robert said, his own voice thick with emotion. "Not just to thank you, but to ask for your help." Rachel looked up through her tears. "My help? The Markham Foundation provides scholarships for nursing students. We fund emergency medical training programs. We support first responders and heroes like you." Robert paused. "But we've been missing something crucial. Someone who understands what it means to sacrifice everything to save a life." He pulled an envelope from his jacket, different from the one his assistant had delivered. "This is a full scholarship to complete your nursing degree, with a stipend for living expenses. When you graduate, there's a position waiting for you as director of our emergency response training program." Robert's voice grew stronger. "I'm not offering this because I owe you a debt. Though I do, I'm offering it because the world needs more people like you in medicine." Rachel stared at the envelope, afraid to touch it. "I can't. This is too much." "You saved my son when no one else would," Robert said simply. "You lost your future because you chose to be a hero. Let me help you get it back." Tommy looked up at Rachel with those bright, trusting eyes. "Please say yes, Miss Rachel. Daddy's been looking for you for so long, and I want you to be part of our family." Family. The word hung in the air like a promise, like hope made tangible. Rachel took the envelope with shaking hands and whispered, "Yes." How do you feel knowing the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Hidden Heroine so you never miss incredible stories like this one. 2 years later, Rachel Lynn walked across the graduation stage in her crisp white nursing uniform, diploma in hand, and a future bright with possibility ahead of her. In the audience, Robert Markham applauded with tears of pride in his eyes, while 10-year-old Tommy cheered so loudly that people in nearby rows turned to smile at his enthusiasm. "That's my Rachel," Tommy shouted, making Robert laugh despite his emotional state. The Markham Foundation's emergency response training program had become a model for other organizations across the country. Under Rachel's leadership, they'd trained over 500 first responders and provided scholarships to 50 nursing students from difficult backgrounds. But more than professional success, Rachel had found something she'd never dared to hope for: a family. After the ceremony, they drove to their favorite spot in Riverside Park, where Robert and Rachel had reconnected 2 years ago. The same bench where she used to eat lunch with the stray dog was now marked with a small plaque in honor of everyday heroes who choose courage over comfort. The old golden retriever, whom they'd adopted and named Lucky, bounded around the park with Tommy, both of them full of joy and energy. "Remember when you used to share your sandwiches with him?" Robert asked, watching his son and their dog play. Rachel smiled, adjusting the simple gold necklace Robert had given her for graduation, a small pendant in the shape of angel wings. "I remember being so hungry I could barely spare the food, but he looked hungrier than I felt." "You've always been like that," Robert said softly, "giving more than you have, caring more than seems possible." They walked over to a new addition to the park, a small memorial garden that the Markham Foundation had funded. A brass plaque at the entrance read, "Sarah Markham Memorial Garden, in memory of lives lost, in honor of lives saved." Rachel placed a white rose on the memorial stone, something she did every month without fail. She'd never met Sarah, but she felt connected to her through Tommy and Robert. "She would have loved you," Robert said quietly. "I wish I could have saved her too," Rachel replied, as she always did. "You saved what mattered most to her, her son. That's exactly what she would have wanted." As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the park, Tommy ran over to them with Lucky panting happily beside him. "Dad, can we tell the story again?" Tommy asked, settling onto the bench between Rachel and Robert. "About how Rachel saved me?" It had become a family tradition, the retelling of that day 5 years ago, but now with all the pieces filled in. How a brave nursing student had risked everything for a stranger's child. How a grateful father had searched for years to find her. How kindness and courage had brought them all together. "Once upon a time," Robert began, "there was an angel who didn't know she was an angel." Rachel listened to the familiar words, Tommy's warm weight against her side, Lucky's head resting on her feet. This was peace. This was home. This was the family she'd never thought she deserved. Later that evening, as they prepared dinner together in Robert's kitchen, their kitchen now, Rachel reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the night she'd asked for leftovers in a small diner to this moment of perfect contentment. Tommy was helping her make cookies, flour in his hair, and chocolate chips mysteriously disappearing into his mouth. Robert was grading scholarship applications, making notes about which students reminded him of a young nursing student who'd once changed his world. "Rachel?" Tommy said suddenly, looking up from the mixing bowl. "I'm glad you saved me." "I'm glad too, sweetheart," Rachel replied, ruffling his flour-dusted hair. "But you know what?" "What?" Tommy grinned, showing teeth with chocolate chip evidence. "I think we saved you too." Rachel hugged him close, breathing in the scent of home and family and dreams come true. He was right, of course. They had saved each other. Sometimes, she thought, the greatest act of kindness is allowing others to be kind to you. If you believe that kindness always leaves a kind of magic in the world, please subscribe to Hidden Heroine. Let's spread these heartwarming stories together.